even if it's not perfect, it's perfect enough at this point where we should probably just kind of crank along and let it do its thing. It has a low incidence of kind of false positives and harassment. So, until we can get our blockchain solution for anonymous queries in place, it's probably just just keep it going and make incremental improvements as needed, make it so that it's as low friction as possible. It's not going to, the current NICS systems couldn't not, it's just a practical thing. They can say they want it all they want. They can pass all the laws all they want, but there is zero chance NICS can do a 10x scaling to do universal background checks as implemented now. NICS cannot handle load. And that's probably in our favor, and the main thing that's going to keep any discussion about universal background checks at bay is that there's no fucking way to do it.
What is going on, everybody? 'Tis I, the enigma of the gun airwaves, Miyaovich, welcoming you to Season 3 of the Liberal Gun Owners Lens podcast, where unprecedented perspectives are packed into the cargo hold for the LGO Lens spaceship Voyagio.
That's fucking Italian.
Don't believe that evolution is possible with guns and public safety in America? It's already happening, y'all. Minds are evolving. Think guns versus public safety is the only game in town, do ya? Think culture war is the big boss, do ya? Then keep your ass in the past. Everyone else, all aboard! I think I've said that a number of times. That's the very basis of it all. You will accept that there is NICS in some one way or another. Right. So a question for me is always, does it work? I think it does. I believe it does from what I've looked at. You brought up that report, the 2020 NICS operations report. This is a good way to dive back into it. What do you see? Have you looked at the report? What have you seen from NICS where you go, okay, this is good, or I can accept this, or these things seem to work? Have you had any of that?
Sure. Yeah. So we went deep, obviously, in the report that we wrote. We kind of, we got very familiar with how many checks go through, what the load is, what the kind of stats are, the raw stats for what's approved, what's not, what happens when things aren't approved, where the data comes from, et cetera. And then the 2022 report, which, again, I believe is the most recent, pretty much does the same thing. In a pretty objective way. It is a pretty easy read, and it's not, not unpleasant to read. It's an interesting problem. We can't divorce the overhead of NICS versus the benefit of it. And we don't get into that both in the report and our report and the NICS report. I still think it's worth having that discussion because we are critical of background checks at OSD. We prefer it where there wasn't the NICS in its current implementation because the data doesn't show that it does a hell of a lot. The guy who, Eric Siegel, right?
I know the name, but
he's a researcher. One of the kind of anti-gun groups leverages him. But he's actually a pretty reasonable dude. I mean, he's obviously a very kind of left-leaning professor. I don't know how he leans, to be quite honest. Yeah. I shouldn't say that. Is it
Siegel? Is it Seligman or Siegel?
I believe it's Siegel.
I know Seligman's work. He's very, they use Seligman a lot. He's a professor of psychology and things like that, but probably a different person.
Maybe I'm getting the name wrong, but the bottom line is he has some good research of how useless, he's not afraid to call out how useless the majority of these quote unquote common sense things are from a statistical analytical point of view. And both our own OSD researcher, BJ Campbell, and him kind of came to the same conclusion that there is a slight, like a single digit percentage benefit in having a background check system in general. Which you can argue, okay, a good thing if we can grab 1, 2, 3%, improvement in outcome because of it. But then you got to look at what's the cost?
Yeah.
And it's quite large. And there's an entire division of people with many, many millions of dollars of infrastructure and hundreds of millions of dollars of kind of second order infrastructure to keep records and to basically track us all like dogs that you're paying for that ability to get that 2, 3%, improved outcome. So we're going to say that, and I want to put it on record that I'm not I'm not in love with the whole thing. I want to put that out there as objective data that we can work with. Okay, having said that, put that to bed. NICS is pretty incredible in that it does these people working their asses off in West Virginia do put in a lot of effort to make sure it is accurate and quick. And as you've seen the stats, they're doing 2.5 to 3 million checks a month. And it's using 4 or 5 disparate data sources about who makes a disqualifying person in a system where they sometimes, and I have firsthand experience with this, where they have to go fax a courthouse in Georgia or call a clerk in South Carolina and say, like, we're not getting a clear picture on this person. There's some sort of record, but there's no disposition. What's the state? Oh, send a fax, and Jenny, Mabel's in on Tuesdays and Fridays. She'll get to it and literally go to a file cabinet and look through some paper records and find out what happened with John Smith with his domestic violence arrest. If it was the same guy, how it was disposed of, what's the deal? They have to do that in 3 days, right? If after 3 days nothing comes back to the NICS personnel, the FFL on the other end of this fiasco, by Brady law, is allowed to, at their discretion, to release the firearm. Okay, so FFLs have their own, and every gun store has their own policy. If we get the instant check, you're good to go. If you get delayed, you have 3 days. At the end of 3 days, if we don't get a determination, the FFL can decide, well, if I'm clear to give it to you, I will. Or they can say, no, I'm going to wait until I hear back. Okay. And the report has all the stats on that. But the stats generally of that are in the, I want to say, the scenario I just described of the 10, 20 something million a year of checks that go through, 372,000 were in that state, right? So a pretty small percentage of the tens of millions of records that get checked. So of those 372,000, they're trying to figure out what happened. What's the state of this person? And eventually they can't. 290,000 of those, they just punt and it gets disposed of. And the rest, they kind of get some sort of resolution, the other 190K, whatever it is. So that gives you kind of the scale of a tiny percentage that are actually getting any meaningful action. And we can debate is that useful or not. And then you get into the minutia of each of those cases and what happened. And in the vast majority of cases, nothing happened. Like, it wasn't that big a deal. It was a false positive, et cetera, et cetera. So that's kind of some of the raw data people can kind of look through. But I want to give you an idea of the scale, that it's not this magic bullet that's like, denying thousands and thousands of people. The majority are going through. Just some more idea of the scale of things. So that it's about 1.45% of all the queries are denies. So that's the percentage that NICS is effective in catching, about 1.4% of people who who didn't pass. And that's a number that we can do math with and understand, is it worth all the aggravation or not. Of that, I think 1.29% challenge it. So there were last year, or 2022, there were 24,000 people who challenged their denial because, like, hey, this is bullshit. Why am I getting flagged? And of those, about 6,800 were overturned as false positives. So we can do the math. So it's a relatively small percentage that are true. Like, your civil rights were fucked, right? 6,820 people had to go through like all sorts of bureaucratic bullshit to say, like, you got the wrong guy, the records are wrong, I'm free and clear. They have to jump through, it's definitely a guilty till proven innocent thing where they have to like submit fingerprints, go to this website, ask for adjudication. You got to unfuck me here. And 6,820 people had to do that. Again, just an idea of what's going on.
So I'm considering whether or not I should go here, because this is maybe we should. I'd be interested to hear what you think. So, Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr., the great jurist, said in his first lecture called Liability in the book Common Law, which is a very famous foundational legal book. It's a collection of his lectures. In the first chapter, in his first lecture called Liability, he says this. This is, I'm not quoting it, right? But this is the concept. When it comes to killing and harming, humans harming one another and killing one another, this is the basis of law. If we don't have rules in our tribes, or we don't have rules in our societies based on killing and harming one another alone, the tribe or the civilization will fall apart. That is the history of it. If you leave that to anarchy, what you have is Hatfield and McCoy's. He didn't say that at the time, but what you have is blood feud. So the elders, the people in charge, need to have a system of some kind or rules to deal with the fervency of what happens after somebody gets killed between both parties' families or both groups or whatever. If you don't judge on that and adjudicate and come up with something so that rational minds can be a part of something, you're in a worse place. And there's no time in human history where that wasn't the case. It will always happen, right? So what Holmes says is, even if there's no technical effect on killing or future killing based on this, you still must provide it because it has an emotional effect of pulling everybody back down to earth. Even if it doesn't prove that it's going to do something, the symbolic aspect of going through the process and the pomp and circumstance of the structure of this process does something to people to keep things from going off the edge. And so, this is actually when people believe that the law is all technical and all rational. It actually isn't. That's actually not the full nature of it. It's technical, but it's also emotional, right? So that being said, I feel like the background check, whatever it is what needs to be in place because of what Holmes is talking about there with social psychology, right? There's a benefit to having it. I'm not saying that the numbers you just gave don't matter. Holy shit, they matter. That's really important. But the other thing that matters is we'll also never be in a society where we don't have that kind of a thing, because we've learned that as a species to do that. So with me saying that, like, well, what do you think about that first? Is that bullshit to your mega nerd brain? What do you think?
No, that's that's a thoughtful take. And it's almost kind of what we saw in our research into background checks, of that it is this security blanket. Like, it does pacify a huge number of individuals who are completely ignorant of what I just said or what it does or how it even works or what it means, a background check. But it gives them that, like you said, that feeling of a coherent society that has quote unquote protections in place and yada yada. I had not really thought about that deeply. Like, if it wasn't there, how worse people would go after guns in the whole ecosystem.
Oof.
That's an interesting, like, that is a blind spot I think I had, as far as like, well, fuck NICS, I don't want any background check. But then the reality would be like, man, what would happen or would attempt to be put in place would probably be way worse.
Sure.
Right? From the people who are just cannot live their life with that amount of freedom, right? Out there, or that this kind of lack of that security blanket. So that's definitely, I'll think more about that. I think it's an interesting, good take. That's quite interesting.
Now, the other thing that I'm really interested in is stopping this shit with overlaw, with what's the term I've used or just read about? It is, but anyway, it's hyperlexis. This tendency of our government and the governments of the West to use laws and policy to try to address every single fucking problem under the sun.
Oh yeah.
And ever growing forever and ever and ever. It never ends. And one of the reasons why it likely has not completely caught fire in the United States of America, unfortunately for me, is called the Republican Party. Is likely one of the reasons for that. Their obtuseness is also a problem, but at the same time, if it were just the liberal, Democrat, progressive people, we would likely have, we want to talk about a religion. The religion of, I'm going to fucking pass law and policy, and it's going to be it's going to be California, and maybe California on steroids is what it's going to be. So because of that, I'm interested in what laws work, what's posturing, what's symbolic, what do they pass because it's symbolic, what's what we call embedding, which is my goals are 10 steps down the road. I got to get something in on step 1. So let me embed something that's not quite as tricky or contentious, but I'll get something in there, and then I'll just incrementalize towards my goal. I'm not interested in embedding. I'm not interested in symbolic shit. I'm interested in, what do laws actually fucking do? Do they do it or do they not do it? Because regardless of what people think, we need those ones, whatever they may be, and not the fucking other ones. So what does NICS do? Which is what you just answered with these numbers. Like, what does NICS do? What doesn't it do? And even if it is symbolic and we have to give up on that one, we have to have something symbolically there for the emotional aspect. We should still know about what it does and what it doesn't do. So you just kind of laid that out for us. What do you think should be done? What would open source defense do? Maybe you don't. That's okay if you don't have this answer for a background check. What would be better than NICS? Because we're probably going to have a background check. What would be better?
So I think most of the kind of new wave of pro-gun people are in agreement here that kind of that same thing, like, okay, background checks are kind of this thing we just have to deal with. Fine. I'm a tech guy. What would I like to see? And we're kind of all in agreement on a abstracted instant check system that anyone could use. Anyone has access to NICS in a kind of, blockchain anonymous app where you could query someone like, I want to sell, Crazy Randy a gun. You give me weird vibes,
yes.
Which, I'm not 100% sure on this Randy guy.
Good call.
But I could run your license, the standard, without a full 4473, just like run your driver's license through this black box app that does this kind of anonymous lookup that is destroyed to say, like, this guy red or green. Okay. And if you're green, fine. We're two citizens engaged in commerce. Leave me alone. If you're red, it's like, you have an issue you should clear up. Okay. I don't know why, what, how, or who, but it's like, it's saying you have some issues that relative to the prohibited persons list, and we're not in good terms.
Yeah.
Right. That's totally doable. Again, the technology problem we're solving here is fucking trivial. It's not trivial getting the departments and the states that have the records to kind of do it in a way that safely protects us all, but yet gets the data where it needs to be. And there's ways to do it. Absolutely. The socials do it all the time. Right. So there's all solvable problems. But that's what I would, if I had to have a check system, that's what I would want. Mm-hmm. Right. And from a technological standpoint, we have everything we need to say red or green on an anonymous black box app where nobody's data is basically retained and exploited.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, that's probably, that's something, your idea there, I would have to think about it for a long, long time about all of the implications for everything. But it's interesting. It's also interesting. What the most interesting part is perception versus reality. So I'm not even sure what Chuck is calling himself these days, like, independently minded.
I have no idea. I've given up. I completely given up.
Doesn't matter. These are fucking labels. But I'd put you in like the tech bro, libertarian-ish kind of horseshoe towards that stake kind of area. That's where I've kind of, my hip shot would be. So there's you. And then my neighbor who has the 60 acres behind me. My shooting lane that I have right here is half on his property because that's the best place for it. And he's just pro-gun guy. We walk the line off and worked it ourselves. He loves it when I shoot because he's retired. He's on a fixed income. He can't blow through ammo. He wants me to shoot so everybody else in the neighborhood knows there's guns over here, even though everybody fucking shoots on their property where I am. But he's like, I like that. And he shoots with me on there sometimes or whatever. He considers himself like a hardcore conservative, and he's not. I've met a few of these cats down here. Like, they think they're like hardcore, but they're moderates, man.
Exactly. What you talking about?
Yeah. It's in their head. They need to be like hardcore. But anyway, I was talking to him one day. Oh, this was actually when he was here. Well, the other co-founder of Liberal Gun Owners, Adam Sorum, was here, and we shot with my neighbor on the lane. And we had a powwow, and sat down. They had beers. I had kombucha. We talked about guns and gun laws and all that stuff. And surprisingly, I'm air quoting with my fingers, my extreme conservative neighbor was totally fine with universal background checks as long as there was a universal system that private parties could also get into just to check on the numbskull that they might be selling the thing to.
Right.
So he's not quite as absolutistly hardcore as he thinks he is when he's digging that. So you're also coming up with an idea like this where, well, what if we could just have a thing where we could check on one another? And of course that would have to be tied into another database, a government-related database. That's what I'm taking from this, at least at first, is because I'm so used to all the absolutism from gun rights people, which is shot from my cold dead hands, no fucking way. Jesus dropped it out of the sky. George Washington picked it up. Don't fucking tell me anything, right? That's what you're not coming from that position. Or did you guys write about this idea on the app, and did I miss it? This kind of idea? Are you going to be writing about it in the future? Or?
Yeah, we have, obviously a couple hundred newsletters. I'd have to go back and look where we kind of did that. BJ Campbell at Hand Waving Freakoutery, his Substack did a more in-depth one about the benefit, cost-benefit analysis of the background check. That's a good read.
Okay, I'll do that.
I'm sorry I don't have the
That's
link
fine, I'll find it.
HWFO is his Substack. It's good stuff. And he'd be, you could chew fat with him on the podcast as either as part of OSD or part of HWFO. But he's a good old Southern boy, so interesting conversation.
We have such a profound infrastructure. We have such a profound system in this country, and I don't see any kind of major dismantling of it in the next 100 years, 50 years. I don't see that unless the Yellowstone caldera or the asteroid or something is going to have to happen, like
fundamental reset,
some kind of shit happen, or
Black Swan event,
the AI people that are like, it's going to kill us. That actually happens. I don't see it changing. So whatever it is our ideas are, or this is an uphill fucking thing, is the thing we covered before, man. This is an uphill thing. We're going to have to integrate with whatever is there in some way, one way or another, which is why, again, I think the brains need to be super large, right? And unrelenting, because certainly the Bloomberg people, the Democratic Party, they're fucking full bore.
I'm actually optimistic, because I think, again, a side effect of all the evils of social media and everything, it does allow for us to organize on the other side and for us to bring in people. Like OSD is very successful, just exposing people to these ideas. And again, it's such a natural sell that I think more smart people, more influential people, at least more nerd people, tech people, are more on board with what you just described than not, right? They can't camp forever in the anti-gun crowd. Eventually they're going to get exposure. Eventually they're going to have to do some critical thinking. And it that position falls apart when you start using your intellect and you have concerns about, okay, there's too many deaths because of guns, right? And eventually, like, tech people are sick of hearing the headline bullshit. Mm-hmm. Right? And they're going to say, well, where are the deaths and guns? And then they're going to, first fucking thing they're going to see is like, oh shit, like 2/3 are suicides, right? So this scary 35,000 number is actually effectively just mostly white men killing themselves, if you look at the stats, right? And so if you correctly start addressing those issues in one basket, fine. You left with the other 13,000, things that are actual murders. Then you're like, okay, well, that's a really small number. Right? As far as statistics and any sort of computer science or technology problem, right? And you'll be like, okay, what's going on there? You could look at every single one, right? You could look at every single murder with a firearm in the United States easily. And you could say like, okay, we can, like, where's it happening? What time of day? What conditions? What people? What's going on? And then that just puts itself like the most obvious thing, like, holy shit, here, and here, we got some serious trouble. Yeah. And then 99% of the other places, it's like there's nothing going on, right? And it's just, you start just iterating through that. And like, why is people like so afraid to do that and not willing, certainly the anti-gun groups just will not ignore everything I just said, absolutely ignore it. And so I think smart people are going to go more down that path like I just described. And then we can get real solutions, right? Of like, we know exactly where these bad things are happening. Yeah. And then it gets a little difficult because now you're into very specific social policy and other wider issues to help alleviate these effects. And then we're into another discussion. Yeah. But I think it's in our favor.
Yeah, I do think, as I said last time, this wouldn't get us where we need to go, but to get us started, $50 million, 10, 12 years.
That's right. Yeah, you had a good breakdown of.
It would be like there was the era before this happened, and then the era after. And maybe everybody in the country wouldn't recognize it or know about it. Just like you and the cadre of people that were in the woods in West Virginia did this work on NICS, and maybe you impacted it in such a big way. You're not sure, but let's say you did. No one would ever fucking know about you guys.
Right.
So, not that whoever the group of big brains are that get the $50 million, maybe some of them need to be known. I would say they do, but most of them wouldn't need to be known. And that's also doesn't match well with the American thing because everybody wants to be fucking seen for what they're doing. I'm the guy who kind of doesn't want to be seen a little bit.
No, I think there's plenty of people who
would be cool with. I just think $50 million in a decade, it'd be over. Like whatever it is that we're talking about, the start would start for kind of the vibe where you and I are talking about. Versus whatever the billions of dollars are on the other side. We would just need $50 million in a decade with the high brains. And we would get a serious fucking start. And right now, that's a lot of money. But kind of generally, as I look at it, it's not a lot of money.
No, it's not. I think it's definitely a brain. It's a people problem more than a money problem. So the capital can be, we could raise 50 million one way or another. It's not, like you say, it's not a huge thing on a major program like that. But it's the people who could execute with it. And I can't point to I can point to a handful of people now because actually there's a cadre on Twitter that really get it, but it's a small cadre and their thought process is right on point. But they either have day jobs or it's just not enough.
Yeah.
But it's doable.
Yeah, and it has to be. It's got to be full time. I mean, I look at the difference between when I went on a 5-year run and we had money, and I was on a 5-year run. Every day, 7 days a week. There was enough for me to get hardly paid, but enough, for me to justify it and what I was able to do versus what I've been able to do in the last 18 months. It's two totally different games. But yeah, people that would be willing to put in on it for 5-year contract, just 5 years, come work for our thing. Here's you're going to be your salary. No, you're not making a fucking shitload of money. You're making enough and we're going to crush this fucking problem. Let's settle this bullshit once and for all. Because frankly, Chuck, I've been staring at this nexus point between guns and public safety for, whatever it is now, for fucking 13 years straight. I'm fucking tired of it.
Yep.
I'm tired of it.
Aren't we all?
I'm tired. I'm just so over it. And the reason why I got too tired is I thought I had to sit there and keep looking at it and accepting it. But no, I don't. And you don't. We don't. Gun owners don't. Right. We can get the spaceship, build it, move downstream, put it in the new thing and go, are you guys sick of it too? Come on down. No, we're not going where you are. You're coming to where we fucking are because we got sick of it and we spent the money and here it is. If you want to be cool, just like with Facebook, IG, just like what Silicon Valley did with everything else, the whole world went, the nerds went, fuck you. We're going to be down here. You're either going to come here or you're not. And the world went, we're not going to, okay. And then they did. Right. I think it's weird, but the reason why I think I'm optimistic is this is the last fucking place anyone would think this would happen. Guns. It's the last place. Number one. Number two, the people that are involved, I said it before, they don't even, like in the gun reality, they talk about like being primed to be dominated or beaten. They don't even know where the fucking field is, Chuck. They don't even know where the stadium is. Like we got it. We just need the body of the people. I don't care what it is. Like, let's just do it. Do you have any other thoughts on NICS? Because we're about 90 minutes in, or any thoughts in general?
Yeah, I just want to make sure that did we cover your kind of big questions on NICS? There's a lot of details on NICS of, again, from a technical nerd point of view that are important to know. I mean, it's not every state uses NICS directly. There's still at least 13 to 20 states that use it supplementally, what they call point of contact states, like California that has their own DROS, dealer record of sale. Looks like a 4473, but it's their version. Other states kind of do it. So NICS is like involved. Some of the stats account for that differently. So you have to take this all into account when you're looking at the quote unquote background check system. Some states use it. Some states don't. Some states have their own. So it's a complicated little ecosystem, but it, generally works. And then the other interesting thing to go deep on one day is the data sources, the 5 data sources, which are certainly outlined in that document. But like, from a kind of point of view, like, okay, are these valid? Are they good? Are they updated? What's the quality of that data from III or NCIS or all these other kind of sources? ICE gives information. The military gives their information. NICS has its own database of things that it learns about people. It's worth kind of examining, that ecosystem and understanding the pros and cons of data being consolidated in those various ways, and how what it means for both kind of criminal justice and for tracking of individuals.
Yeah.
So it's a complicated system. They're learning so much about it. I'm relatively at peace with it, in that it's mostly accurate and mostly gets the job done. I think the biggest thing for me is it pacifies the mobs, kind of like you were saying. And even if it's not perfect, it's perfect enough at this point where we should probably just kind of crank along and let it do its thing. It has a low incidence of kind of false positives and harassment. So, until we can get our blockchain solution for anonymous queries in place, it's probably just just keep it going and make incremental improvements as needed, make it so that it's as low friction as possible, and let the policy people go fight about, what the ultimate solution should be for the next 20 years and leave us in peace.
What about the 1-2 punch concept where we would have NICS in the normal system and then let's say OSD makes the blockchain black box thing and individuals can use that for private sales and so on and so forth?
Right. So that discussion will come to a head if universal background checks get somehow pushed through. Right. And at that point, we go hard. If we're realizing that that's going to be a reality, we got to go hard on the frictionless blockchain-based anonymous app to check. Yeah. Right. That's where we need to assert, this is how it's going to be done. It's not going to, the current NICS systems couldn't not. It's just a practical thing. They can say they want it all they want. They can pass all the laws all they want, but there is zero chance NICS can do a 10x scaling to do universal background checks as implemented now. NICS cannot handle load. And that's probably in our favor, and the main thing that's going to keep any discussion about universal background checks at bay is that there's no fucking way to do it. Good luck. Right. So that discussion, when any UBC discussion should be around we're not doing shit until we have a anonymized blockchain based solution.
Yeah. And if we ever get there, count me in on, I can't add to the software developer, the coding or anything like that. But if you need brains and mouths to support the idea, let me know. Right.
Right. Because, no, you're very well versed in in this space. So yeah.
I would love to. I don't need to know the technicals. Just here's what we're going after. Here's what it does. This is better than what they're proposing. That kind of shit. So I think that's good, man. That's 90 minutes of fucking high brain action.